Hi, everyone. Today we're talking about making that transition from being an individual contributor to a people manager. And joining us for that discussion is emerging actuarial leader Cameron Morris. Cameron's an actuary with 4 years' experience working for a life reinsurer in Sydney. His experiences mostly involve valuation and regulatory capital work. And in addition, he has just become a manager for the first time. Cameron, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Julia, for that introduction and for having me on the podcast. It's great to be here.
It's wonderful to
So,
have this conversation today.
yeah,
So, Cameron, you and I first met when you joined the Guardian Actuarial Leadership Program. And at the time, you weren't yet managing people, but you were looking to move into a management role. And I remember so clearly that day that you got the promotion that, you shared that with the group. And you were telling us about how you'd been promoted into that manager role and you were about to start recruiting your direct reports and interviewing. And I remember there was so much excitement in the group that day as you were sharing that with us. And it's been such a pleasure to watch you evolve into that management role and really sort of feel comfortable in that role.
yeah, thank you. Yeah, no, that was it was a good experience, and it was great to be able to share it with the group at the time as well. So yeah, it was timing worked out very well.
Yeah, it did. So looking forward later in today's interview to hear a bit more about what that transition was like for you and some of the great bits and some of the challenging bits. But I wonder if we start, Cameron, by if you can tell us a little bit about your career path to date.
Yeah, that sounds good. So I graduated from ANU in Canberra back at the end of 2018. And I think, like a lot of people doing actuarial degrees, I wasn't really sure what sort of practice area I wanted to go into, or, maybe even the type of organization as well, like a corporate or a consultancy. So, like pretty much everyone does, I just ended up applying for, lots and lots of different roles. And I ended up getting an offer from RGA, who are a specialist life reinsurer.
Mm.
And I started working there in their valuation team at the start of 2019 now. And yeah, as I said, I wasn't really sure where I wanted to sort of go with that, but I think I was quite lucky given that, because I'm happy with where I ended up, and in particular, I think working for a reinsurer, you get some of that sort of balance in a way between what you'd sort of maybe get at a corporate and a consultancy. So
Mm.
I think in some ways, it has a lot of the benefits of a normal corporate over a consultancy, then that maybe your work life balance, or maybe not the work life balance, but the workload's maybe a bit more predictable, let's say,
Mhm.
some of the time. And also you, sorry, also you really sort of get to, I guess, sort of specialize and build an expertise in the area in which you specialize. Whereas maybe at a consultancy, sometimes you're spread a bit more thinly over lots of different types of work, which is, also a benefit in some senses as well.
Mm.
But then on the other hand, what I like about the reinsurer is that you do get sort of an overview in a way of the market as a whole, through the exposure we have with our cedents, which you wouldn't get at a lot of other, I think, corporate environments. But it's something that might be more typical of a consultancy. So that's
Mm.
been really good.
Yeah.
Um,
So the
yeah,
best of
so
both worlds. So
yeah,
you've enjoyed the best of both worlds working for a reinsurer,
yeah, I suppose
having
so.
that
Yeah.
depth of experience, but also kind of almost a consulting sort of style role.
Yeah, in a sense. Yeah, in a
Mm.
sense. So yeah, I started working 4 years ago now as a graduate analyst. So my in the valuation team. So my work consisted mostly of sort of doing and calculating and reviewing reserves, analyzing the profits or the management results, and then regulatory capital calculations as well. And then last year as well, I got the opportunity to spend 6 months with the pricing team, which was a really good opportunity to sort of get broader exposure early in my career, which I appreciated. So I worked on two large group tenders while I was there. And like everyone else, obviously, everyone goes through. I was studying for those first couple of years,
Mm.
but I was fortunate enough to come out of uni with quite a lot of exemptions already. So I managed to qualify as a fellow about 2 years ago now. And I recently got the opportunity to start managing someone for the first time. Well, that was a sort of a while back now while I was doing the program, as you mentioned.
Yep.
That was a bit of a, I guess, different experience to the sort of more hard or technical skills I'd focused on more up until that point. And also that coincided as well with getting a bit more responsibility in the sort of BAU type work I was doing, in particular the regulatory capital calculations that you mentioned. So, and I would say probably that's my favorite part of my job, the regulatory capital stuff, because what I found is, on the one hand, there's sort of level of complexity and detail in there that means you can sort of never rest on your laurels or take anything for granted.
Mm.
I always find myself sort of going back to first principles and then, the principles of the standards and thinking through how it should work and then sort of applying that to what we're seeing. And you also need a sort of decent understanding, I guess, of lots of different things going on in the business. For example, like if the investment strategy changes or something like that, then how does that flow through? So stuff like that, where you might not necessarily see that if you're just calculating reserves. And then on the other hand as well, what I like about capital is if you think about sort of what's the role of an actuary working for a life insurance company, or sort of the social purpose, if you like. I think a big part of that's going to be about making sure the institution you work for has, the resources to pay claims to meet the commitments it's made to its policyholders when they need it, right? So there's lots of different ways that actuaries can make that happen, from even pricing to making sure the rates charged are appropriate for the risk, risk management and so on. But I think with capital, I do feel that connection quite closely, because it's sort of like saying, well, how much do we need to hold now to make sure that we can meet those obligations, meet those commitments, even under a very adverse set of scenarios. So yeah, I guess that's sort of like a quick summary of my career to date, and where I'm at.
Wow, what a lot you have fit into a very short period of time in your career, Cameron. Like, and I love the way you connect your work back to that social purpose, as you describe, of insurance. It sounds like you've had quite a diverse experience in different types of actuarial work, both in the technical space, but also, having qualified and stepped into a management role in just a couple of years as well. So you've really packed a lot into your so far short career, Cameron.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
So, I mean, one of the things, as we are stepping into management roles, is so much we learn from those that are around us, and the diversity of experience that you've described. I imagine that you have worked for a range of leaders in those various roles that you've had. Is there someone, can you tell us about, a great leader that you've worked for through your career, and maybe what was different or unique about their management style?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So, I have to say, I've worked for and worked with a lot of great actuaries and at RGA, and it's been really good to be able to learn from a lot of, good experienced actuaries. And I would say, I think often, particularly the case probably with actuaries, maybe, something in our personality types, that, maybe we're not highly extroverted or whatever, but, I think often great actuarial leaders don't necessarily see themselves, as sort of leaders, as natural leaders, because, maybe they're just not sort of comfortable sort of seeing themselves in that role, I guess. But, I think actuaries like that can still be, and often are, great leaders, because, they can sort of encourage people to sort of challenge. They can, well, I think, they really show their staff that they care about them as well. And and I think I have a couple of sort of examples. So I remember back when I was studying my Part 3s, and I was doing, obviously working at the same time, and I was doing a piece of work in valuation related, where it was actually something that I looked at quite recently in my studies, and it looked to me like we sort of weren't doing it right based on what I'd seen in the studies.
Right.
So, it was a time when the team was under a lot of pressure, like we were really busy and stuff. So it was tempting to sort of put it away for now, maybe bring it up later, or But then it was also, well, if you do that, then you might forget about it, or if there is actually an issue, then it's too late, and people have, priorities have changed, people have moved on, right? So I decided I would bring it up, with this leader, and I said, look, I've found this, but actually when we're studying, it looks like it should be done like this. Do you know why we don't do it this way? And it would have been very busy to sort of say, oh, that's how we've always done it, forget about it, or it's not material or whatever. But that's not what happened. So they said, let me go away and think about it and come back to you. And even though they were very busy, and so and then later that same day, they came back and said, actually I've thought about it, and even though your approach that you described is, in general what we do, there's actually a sort of slightly different scenario that applies to us because of this, and we're able to explain it. And and they were right, and we were doing it correctly.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that it really showed. Yeah,
that's a great example, though, isn't it? Sorry, so it showed what you were going to.
Well, I was going to say, yeah, it showed that. Well, first of all, my opinions are taken seriously. I think by someone that's senior and also busy. And I think as well, it sort of shows. Well, the answer was not given in a way that made me feel stupid for asking, and actually helped me to learn something as well.
Yeah.
So I think it's the sort of thing where it's going to encourage people to ask questions in the future and challenge in the future. And then, I think that's a good culture to have, because sometimes there could actually be something wrong.
That is a great culture to have. And it sounds like it was really a win-win situation, because you had the courage to ask the question, because sometimes, it could be tempting to not ask the question, but you saw something that you thought wasn't consistent with your understanding or what you've been learning, and you felt it was right to raise it. And I think that's certainly a good approach. But not only did that leader could have just said, "Oh, no, what would you know? You're not qualified." But they didn't.
Yeah, exactly.
They heard you, and they thought about it and considered it. And, that shows a really strong professional culture, and a culture of respect across different levels as well. So, yeah, what a great example.
Yeah, and you mentioned, me having the courage, and it may be partly, but I think for the most part, I wouldn't sort of see myself as someone that's really, really sort of confident, challenging more senior people. I think it was just because of the team culture and the culture that particularly this leader had, built. So yeah,
they'd created a safe space for you to be able to speak up.
Yeah. So it's sort of another example, I guess, and sort of getting to, I think, something else that's important is how leaders respond to mistakes or issues that are picked up in the team. So I was doing a piece of work, this is quite a while ago now, where it's basically a check where two numbers just need to reconcile, and they weren't reconciling. So it's quite frustrating, because there's a lot of sort of technical, sort of very detailed spreadsheets underpinning this. So anyway, I went home that day because I was in the office. So I went home and I was decided, I'm not going to let this go. I'm just going to try and get to the bottom of it. So I turned off, all my distractions, my Teams, my email, just sort of decided I'm going to figure this out. So spent a couple of hours just sort of tracing back through spreadsheets and stuff. And what I eventually found was that the issue boiled down to a mistake that I'd made in an earlier process, like a week or so earlier, that was sort of, very concealed, but it was rearing its head in this way. So anyway, first thing the next morning, I went back in and brought it up with the team leader and said, look, I've made a mistake here, and that's why this number wasn't working. I think we can still fix it. And yeah, there was time to fix it. It was a bit of a hassle, and a few people had spent a bit of time on it, but yeah, we could fix it. So anyway, yeah, later in that same day, I was sort of saying, well, we were discussing, the issue, and I was saying, well, sorry for this mistake I'd made and stuff, because obviously you do feel bad in that situation, because you've caused people, to stress a little bit, and you've wasted a little bit of people's time and stuff. So, but yeah, I remember what they said.
Mistakes happen. I mean,
yeah,
that's
exactly.
just part of it, right? It's just, it does happen because we're human, and yeah.
Yeah, and what they said, I thought was a really good point, because the first thing they said was, well, it's good that you feel a little bit bad, because it shows that you care.
It's true.
but at the same time, everyone makes mistakes. And also, it would have been very easy for you to not bring it up. So I'm not going to get upset at you for bringing it up, because what message am I sending then? And I think that's quite right, because the amount of sort of digging I'd actually had to do to get to the point where I found it. If I had sort of decided, this is my mistake and I'm not going to raise it, then it would have been very, very easy to probably no one would have ever found it, and we would have just reported an incorrect number. Yeah. So, but the thing about it was that was not something that really ever occurred to me to do, because of the trust that I had, in the culture and this leader, that I wouldn't be thrown under the bus and blamed, and they'd still have my back. So
you knew that it was safe to highlight the issue that you'd found.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Even though maybe no one would have found out, even if you hadn't have said anything, you knew that it was the right thing to do, to bring it up, and you also felt safe and supported to be able to do that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Wow. Some great leaders that you've worked for, and it sounds like a great culture that they've created as well, so that you can raise questions and also highlight mistakes and issues, and that's a really, really important characteristic of a great leader, to be able to create a culture.
Yeah, definitely. And then a sort of final sort of example, I guess, not so much an example, but just more like a cultural thing, I suppose, is like everywhere, there's going to be times where people have sort of personal issues, or people are sick or whatever, especially during the pandemic, and they need to sort of have that time. And what the culture that we I've found that we have is that whenever that sort of thing happens and someone is in that situation, the priority for them always sort of switches from the work that they have on to making sure, first of all, that they're okay.
Right.
And then if there's work that needs to be done on their desk, then other people in the team can sort of jump in and help out, and we can shuffle things around. And I think that's really important, because that's when you sort of show as a leader that you don't just care about the work that your people you lead produce, but you actually sort of you care about them as well, right?
Yeah, you care about the people.
Yeah. And I think that's sort of, it's quite a powerful thing to show, because it means that I think that people are going to be more likely to show up for you as well when you need them.
Absolutely. It works both ways, doesn't it? When
Yeah.
leaders look after their people, that often fosters quite a significant amount of loyalty
Yeah, for
in their
sure. Yeah.
teams. Yeah. Yeah. And then as someone in that team working for that leader, you want to bring your best to work when you know that your leader has your back.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, some great examples there, Cameron. And I liked what you said at the start around how they might not think of themselves as great leaders. And it is interesting, isn't it, that sort of identity around leadership and how we describe ourselves or define ourselves, and how, some of the best leaders aren't those out there going, oh, I'm an amazing leader and this is my role, but they're just doing it. They're just being
Yeah.
it and demonstrating it.
Yeah, exactly. And it might not be something that they're even comfortable with, but they can still
Yeah.
be good at it. Yeah.
Yeah, they're still
Yeah.
good at it. Yeah,
Mm.
amazing. Thank you
Mm.
for sharing those examples. So you as a leader, you're new in this management role, or not so new anymore. You've been doing it for a little while now. What do you like most about being an actuary in a management role?
Yeah, I would say the thing I like the most is sort of being able to um, help people on things that I've sort of worked on in the past and built up a good understanding of by being, in the team for a while.
Mm,
Being able to sort of then sort of coach or mentor them through some of that stuff, and be able to sort of witness their progress as they go.
mm,
And in particular, I think, when you can sort of help them get to the point where they become self-sufficient and they don't require your assistance anymore.
mm,
Um, and I guess it might be sort of odd to say, that the most rewarding thing is when the assistance isn't required anymore, or you're not sort of needed anymore. But I think if that's because of an investment that you've made in the people around you, if through that sort of mentoring and coaching, then that can be a rewarding thing, I think.
very rewarding. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's interesting. The other day, actually, there's someone new in the team, and they were doing a task for the first time, and they needed someone to sort of do a bit of explaining of it to them,
Uh-huh.
as you would. And I was going to offer my assistance to this, but someone that I actually helped with the same task in the past actually beat me to it. So I sort
Okay.
of got to witness, just sit back and listen to them explaining it, and it was great because they were able to explain it really well, and they were able to explain not just the process to follow, but also the principles underpinning it as
Wow.
well, and explained it perfectly. Um, and I just got to sort of witness it, and
Amazing.
it made that initial investment feel worthwhile, because it's like they've got to the point where they're not just self-sufficient, but they can actually then help other people as well.
Mm,
So yeah, it made that initial investment feel, I think, even more worthwhile. And I think it also can go to show as well that if you sort of do take on that coaching and mentoring role, then it can start sort of creating a culture where that's the norm, where other people are more likely to do it as well.
true.
And then you sort of, I think that's quite good, because you sort of then get into a point where the team is sort of used to just sort of knowledge sharing and building each other up. It just sort of comes naturally. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a really important facet of team culture, isn't it? When you've got that learning mindset, but also that teaching and the power. I mean, what a great story um, to share, that you taught one person how to do something, and then you witnessed them passing on that teaching to someone else.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it means that you're sort of, everyone's paying it forward, but everyone, it means that you're not teaching the same thing over and over again, but you're building the expertise and the skills more broadly, and that's a great power of leverage when it comes to managing people and leading people, if we can share that knowledge as well. So yeah, that's very cool.
Yeah, no, it was good, and it's like seeing it sort of going down another level, I guess, and sort of
Mm,
seeing your initial investment sort of pay off even more, I suppose. So yeah.
absolutely, absolutely.
Mm.
So that's what you enjoy most. You enjoy, seeing that information being shared, but also sort of the rewarding feeling that you get when you've taught someone how to do something, and then you witness them being able to do that, and then also
Yeah, yeah,
paying it
yeah,
forward.
Mm,
Yeah. It is one of the great things. And I think that's one of the things that differentiates um, managers from leaders, if I'm to use that, if I use that terminology, people that are just managing tasks or managing getting things done versus people that are actually building teams and inspiring,
mm,
is that sort of sense of, if you can get to the point where you're making yourself redundant, you're not just making sure that you're the only person that knows everything or the person that knows the most, but you're actually sharing that knowledge so that collectively the team operates more effectively, and it's not just you feeling like your ego needs to fuel the way you behave, and if keeping information to yourself, or trying
mm,
to make sure
mm.
that you're the person that knows the best, the most.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. And I think it's good as well because then it means that you're not always going to be the one sort of doing these, a lot of the stuff. You can sort of then move on to other things, and um, you can sort of be safe in the knowledge that there's lots of other people that then can do it
yeah,
because
exactly.
the culture in the team has meant that they can learn it.
Yeah, yeah. It's very
Mm,
powerful, and very powerful if you've created a culture where that is happening. So
mm.
so that's what you enjoy about being a manager. What's something that you found challenging about stepping into a management role?
Yeah, I would say a challenge, I guess, has been trying to find a balance between sort of providing assistance and help and stuff, and then also letting people have a go and figure things out for themselves
Mm,
sometimes.
mm,
Um, yeah, as I've sort of alluded to in some of my other answers, I love sort of thinking about complex problems from first principles, and then sort of
yeah.
discussing or explaining those principles with other people. And I think as well, you need to be aware sometimes that uh, people need some time to sort of do some of that thinking for themselves, I guess,
Mm,
before you sort of offer the assistance too early necessarily. And I think in particular, during, and this is probably quite common, during periods in which the team is busy, and there's not much time and they're under pressure, then, it becomes difficult to sort of necessarily allow, a lot of time to sort of figure things out for themselves because, there's short-term deadlines that are important.
you just got to
And there's
get
only,
things
only so
done.
much time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And there might be times where like I've sort of finished a lot of the tasks on my desk, and I'm maybe waiting for things to review or something like that. So they're still being done, so I have some capacity. But I think if you find yourself in that sort of situation, the way you sort of approach it, if you're a leader or a manager, is important because there's been times where you're sort of quite stressed and you're focused and you're in the zone and you just think, oh, I'm gonna pick up the first thing that someone else has, and just and complete it for them. And then
Yep.
and you sort of do that and you think, oh, that was great. And in a way, it can be good because you are sort of helping the team to achieve its short-term goals, right? And you
Sure.
are easing some of the burden that's on that person. So it is in some senses good, and the short-term goals are important. But I think there's another side to it as well, which is that you're taking a potential learning opportunity from someone.
Right.
Um, so what I've been trying to do is, instead of just sort of ticking off the first thing that comes to mind when someone else is sort of under a bit of pressure, um, instead it's sort of my approach is just to sort of first of all say, oh, let's just have a conversation about it, and
Mm,
is there anything that I can help out with?
mhm.
And often in that situation, they'll say, the answer will be, oh, well, I haven't, done this before, so it might take me a while to do it. So maybe you can do it.
Yeah.
But I would actually push back on that now a lot of the time and
Okay.
say, the fact that you haven't done it before means that really you should be doing it. So
Mm,
maybe let me take something that you are more familiar with. So then you're not
mm.
missing out on that learning opportunity.
Wow.
Um, yeah, but I think as well, some of the time you do have to sort of be realistic and accept that probably, you know, in the short term deadlines are actually the more important thing. So
Mm,
sometimes you might just have to take something from someone if they haven't done it before because there's just no time for them to
mm.
figure it out. So if that's the case, then obviously you do it and you get it done. But then
Yep.
I think it's important you don't then just sort of forget about it and
Mm,
wait until the next time. You actually sort of set some time aside when you both have a bit more time, and you say, this is how I did it, and you explain it to them, so that then the next time, even when the deadlines are tight, they are able to complete it.
yep.
Because otherwise you can just sort of end up in this cycle where they never get to do it because they've never done it before, but then they've never
Mm,
done it before because it's always too busy.
Yeah.
and there's no time for them to learn it. So I think it's important to, break that cycle if you can.
It's a judgment call, isn't it, to
Hmm.
trade off whether or not it's most efficient, because in most cases it will be faster for you to do it because you've
Oh
done
yeah,
it
definitely.
before, and maybe you've done it many times before,
Hmm.
compared to someone that's never done it before who will take longer. But it's about making that, investment today so
Yeah,
that you can build their skills. Otherwise, you will end up just doing everything yourself, and we can't
exactly.
just
Yeah.
do everything ourselves anyway, even if we wanted to. So
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, okay,
And I
so
think
that.
it's, yeah, and that was, I was going to say, the reason that you are faster a lot of the time is because you've done it before, but then why did you do it before? Is because, you didn't have someone there sort of actually just doing it for you, right? You had to go through
Mm.
some of that pain, I guess,
You
to
learnt
get to
as you
that
went
point.
through it.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
exactly. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. It's an important part of our team's development, isn't it, to have
Mm,
that opportunity to learn and to work things out for
yeah,
ourselves. And it's boring if you're just kind of turning the handle and just doing what you've been told or following a process. I mean, that's not why we became qualified as
no.
actuaries and jumped through all those exams and hoops. So, yeah, so we want to maintain what, create that environment for our juniors as well.
Yeah, definitely.
So, okay, so that's been challenging, but it sounds like you've now got some good mindset and skills and ways to kind of balance that, even though it's going to be a judgment call each time. Um, what's one tip that you'd have for actuaries stepping into management roles for the first time, if you've got one?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think, one of the biggest challenges, I guess, for me was around when I first stepped into the role was around sort of confidence, or maybe sort of feeling like I needed to sort of justify my position, I guess, or maybe imposter syndrome is the best way to describe it, really.
Mm,
And partly maybe because I qualified, quite quickly out of uni, and
you did?
I'm sort of on the younger side for a qualified actuary, I suppose.
Yep.
But when I was first put into that management position, and had more responsibility, I guess I was more. I became quite aware that there were people that I sort of looked up to and respected and admired, I suppose, and that a lot of those people had vouched for me, in order for me to sort of get this extra responsibility.
Mm,
Um, and that sort of, it made me feel, I guess, concerned that I was going to sort of make a mistake and let them down, and sort
mm,
of, disappoint them, I suppose. And then,
yep.
people would say to them, "Oh, well, why did you think they were ready?" Sort of thing.
You felt
So
you felt an obligation to kind of live up to their expectations. You were
I
worried
suppose
about
so.
falling short, maybe.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm,
And I think, on the one hand, that should drive me to work quite hard,
mm,
and be very thorough, but it's also not a sustainable way to work, I think, to be sort of
mm,
always looking over your shoulder, worrying that you've sort of made a mistake, and that you're
yeah.
sort of going to, disappoint people, I suppose.
Yep.
So, yeah, I think, maybe it was just sort of something that comes naturally where you perform the role competently over a sort of period of time and sort of prove to yourself that you can do it. Or, maybe I'm slightly like more mature now. I don't know, but I think what I sort of realized, and probably what I should have known really the whole time, is that, yeah, there's people that have vouched for you, obviously, and you need to repay them by doing your best work. And of course you will. But then, at the same time, they wouldn't have vouched for you unless, they thought you were worth vouching for, right? Like there's no
Right.
other reason they would be doing it.
Yep.
So, if you respect their judgment, and they're saying that they think you're ready for extra responsibility, then, that should give you confidence, I think, that you are ready as well. Like, so I
Mm,
think that
mm.
you should take that, recommendation from them positively rather than negatively.
Yep.
Um, yeah, and I think as well the realization that, one mistake is not going to mean that you've let people down as well. It's really more about how you work as part of a team to hopefully identify mistakes or issues before they become, before they even really become big mistakes or issues.
Yep.
And if not, then it's about how you respond to it. So yeah,
And you've talked about that culture of, creating a safe space for people to raise mistakes, and because
yeah,
mistakes
yeah,
do happen. So, yeah,
mm,
yeah.
yeah. And I know you just asked for one tip, but I thought one other one as well. So
Sure.
um, maybe for young actuaries who want to be in a management role but aren't yet in a management
Mm,
role. I think, something that I realized is that you don't have to be, someone's formal manager to be able to show leadership. One of the most rewarding things that I've mentioned that I'd sort of experienced as a manager, was around sort of mentoring and coaching, and that's not something that requires you being anyone's formal manager. That can be something you do with, your peers even, or maybe someone that's, more junior but doesn't report directly through you. Um, but yeah, I found it rewarding, and also I think it's the kind of thing where it's probably going to prepare you to be a better manager in the future if you sort of take on that role, and also might make sort of other people notice your leadership and therefore help you to actually get to that position as well.
Yeah. Fantastic. So you don't need to be formally a manager to be able to practice and exhibit those management skills and to get
Yeah,
some of the rewards and benefits from being having a managerial role at work.
yeah, definitely, yeah,
Yeah, and that it could actually prepare you. So
yeah.
yeah. Some great reflections there today, Cameron. Thank you. It's been great to hear a bit about your career journey, and to hear some of the great leaders that you've worked for and the safe and respectful team culture that they've built, and the culture of learning that you've built within your teams as well, and how rewarding that's been for you to be able to see some of your teaching in action and sort of that second generation of teaching coming through, as that's being passed down the chain, which is wonderful. And also really interesting to hear about the challenges you found around, doing things yourself versus giving people time to work things out for themselves as well, and how valuable that can be when you can make sure you get the balance right and you're not doing everything yourself. And really enjoyed your tips as well about actuaries stepping into management roles, because as you said at the start, we don't always see ourselves as leaders. Maybe it's something about who we are personality wise, as a profession. I know I'm generalizing there, but I think some of those reflections that you've shared around what great leadership looks like have been really, really interesting, and really interesting to hear your reflections today. Was there
Thank you,
anything else
Gita.
that you wanted to share with us before we wrap up today?
No, nothing in particular. Just thank you very much for having me on today, and thanks for also having me as part of the leadership development program last year as well. I got a lot out of that, and as you said, it was a time it came at a time during which it was a big transition for me, so it was very useful to be able to discuss things with that group. I was sort of, as I was going through the interview process, and then sort of became a manager for the first time. So yeah, that was really good.
It was great to watch your evolution and your building of skills as well throughout that process too, Cameron. So
Thank you.
thank you for your time today, and I'm sure your reflections and tips will be very valuable for our listeners. Thanks, Cameron.
Thank you.